Hello and welcome to the latest presentation of the Rift Valley webinar series. My name is Anne Kruijt and I'm the host for today's talk. If you are participating in the live webinar, you can submit questions or comments in the chat module of the Zoom application at any time during the presentation, and then we'll have time to address these questions after the presentation is complete. Today's speaker is Michael Karani, who graduated with a PhD in African languages in March 2018 from Stellenbosch University. He is a lecturer and director in the Center for Communication Studies in the College of Humanities at the University of Dar es Salaam. He conducted research on morphology and syntax on the two dialects of Maasai spoken in Tanzania, namely Arusha and Barakuyo, during his MA and PhD respectively. His areas of interest is documentation of African languages and morphology and syntax in particular. Please join me in welcoming Michael as he gives his presentation, a survey on Kisongo Ma spoken in Eastern Manyara.
Hi everybody, welcome to my presentation. The presentation is about a survey on Maasai Kisongo spoken in Eastern Manyara. I did this survey in December 2019. I visited two districts, Kiteto and Simanjiro, and the aim of this survey was to basically identify these two districts, because I never visited the districts myself. Also identify areas or wards that are populated by Maasai, the big number of Maasai speakers, and in particular Kisongo speakers. And in doing that, I'll be able to estimate, have a rough number of Kisongo speakers in these two districts in Manyara. But as well, I wanted to identify the neighboring communities that live side by side with the Maasai speakers. As we all know, that will contribute to our investigation on language contact, whether there's any effect on language contact. And that is introduction of my talk for today. And then I met a few language consultants in these areas, and one of them provided a brief background of the history of the Kisongo, who have settled in Kiteto and Simanjiro for quite a long time. And one of the issues that I noted is that earlier on, when Maasai people entered Tanzania, they started to settle in Monduli. That was the native land for the first groups of Maasai who entered in Tanzania, of course, through Kenya. And they also moved to Kiteto. So in 1970s, we had two big districts of Maasai speakers, and in this case, Kisongo speakers. And those districts are Monduli and Kiteto. And then after a while, of course, some years later, Monduli was divided into three districts, and these are Longido, the border between Kenya and Tanzania. We have also Ngorongoro, it's also on the border, and Monduli. So they were split and three districts were made. But also Kiteto was divided into two, and we have Kiteto and Simanjiro. These are particular areas that I visited. So that is a brief history of the migration and settlement of Maasai in Arusha and later in Eastern Manyara. Okay, so in this survey, I visited and talked to people. I visited the headquarters of the districts and talked to people, but I also had a visit to some wards, nearby wards. And by wards, I mean bigger administrative areas. And these include, could be size of 2 or 3 villages up to 4 villages, depending on the number of, people settled in that particular area. So they distribute the districts into wards. You could call them counties if you like, in order to make administration much easier. So when you look at this, these are wards in Kiteto. We have quite a number of them. And I actually managed to talk to somebody who works in the district council, so who's doing planning, development planning. So he knows exactly the number of wards and areas where the Maasai are found in big numbers. In connection to that, as I talk to people, to Maasai speakers, I could also ask about other communities that are found in the area that live together with the Maasai. So you can see in different wards, you can find different speakers of, speaker communities. And take an example of Bagamoyo ward, you have Ngu speakers, you have Arusha speakers, you have Gogo speakers. And likewise to other wards, you can find that there are different speakers living together with the Maasai. And as I was trying to get a picture of number of Kisongo speakers, the language consultants I talked to could give a rough estimate or in terms of percentage of number of Kisongo, particularly Kisongo speakers in those areas. So they could say in Kijungu, for example, you will find 70% of Kisongo speakers. In Lengate, you will find 75%. In Lolera, that is the land for Maasai. All of them are Maasai, and most of them there. And Makame is a word for Maasai, and they are the only people living there. And this second slide, you also find more words for this district. And in the last column on the right, you'll find that, there are different societies living together. You have Rangi, you have Iraku people, and you have wards where there are kind of townships where you have a mix of different ethnic groups living together. Because nowadays they practice farming and cattle herding. So it's a kind of mixed society where you have farming and pastoralism. According to Loti, this is the Languages of Tanzania Atlas, published in 2009. The estimate is around 59,000 Maasai speakers. When we say Maasai speakers, we mean Kisongo, Arusa, and Parakuyo. So this is an estimate that actually covers all dialects of Maasai. So we have seen in different words, you will find Arusa, but also we have seen Parakuyo, for example. In Langatei, we have seen that there are Parakuyo, there are Kisongo, there are Ngu. So that is a kind of inclusive estimate or number or census, if you like, where you have all 3 dialects of Maasai. So it's really a bit, you can't tell how many Kisongo speakers will you find within the 59,000 people. So that is left for research, of course, later in future projects. In the next slide, now we have words that are in Simanjiro. And We have percentage. We have a column for other communities. And this is to give a rough picture of, speakers of Kisongo in these areas. And some other additional ethnic communities that we couldn't find in Kiteto. We have Meru people, we have Pare people. So these are additional ethnic communities that live in this district. Okay, so you can see the percentage, the number of Kisongo speakers, roughly just by thinking about the population, and that is, I'm talking about the estimates provided by consultants, informants that I talked to, just by, it's nothing like exact number, but that's the simplest way they could estimate, saying, for example, in the Nyengi Jave, they would say you find the whole area covered by Maasai, and you only find few bomas, those are homesteads. A few of them maybe, with other people. Maybe they are there for small scale farming, or they work in the farms or in the fields, or as cattle headers for somebody. That means they are hired. So that's how you can find a few number of speakers of other languages in the middle of the Kisongo land. But yeah, okay. And the additional words of Simanjiro district and rough estimates of percentage of Kisongo speakers. And we're not saying this column, other communities column, we're not saying the other communities or ethnic groups that can be found are the ones listed here. We actually leave room because there could be many other ethnic groups or speakers of other languages that that dwell in Simanjiro. So it's a bit not easy to establish all the ethnic groups. Oops, sorry. So referring to the source, the available source we have on the number of speakers in this district, that is Maasai speakers, Lottery reports that we have 82,334 Maasai speakers. And as I said earlier, this number includes all dialects, varieties of Maasai. And from this survey, we could roughly, look at the numbers and the population of the area, and we asked different people how, about what they think about the number of Kisongo versus Arusa and Parakuyu and other, Mas speaking people. And we would establish around 55,000 to be around, within 55,000 to 60,000 speakers of Kisongo. That is really kind of a very rough estimate. And because this survey actually comes as a preparation for a project to investigate Kisongo dialect in this area, we are not saying this is closer to the truth or the facts on the ground, but this is what we can gather for now. Okay, and this is a map from the Languages of Tanzania project. This shows Simanjiro, or this area is the border between Simanjiro and Kiteto, and all of this area is Simanjiro. So we can see names of words, but then I should say that we saw in the previous slides, we saw a huge number of words, unlike on this map. The reason being there has been further division of words recently, based on number of inhabitants of that particular area. So the administration, the government, just divided these words further, so you can find a lot of them. In Kitoto, you can also see areas, names of the words labeled in different colors, and this gives you a rough picture of how the geography of the area is, if one wants to think of visiting, and they get a compass of how the areas are marked. Okay, and now based on the simple preliminary research done, I could identify 4 different language phyla. You'll have Bantu speakers in this area. You'll find Cushitic, that is Iraq, Eastern Nilotes, and that we mean Kisongo, Arusa, and Parakuyo, but also you'll find a few number of Datoga and Akiek. Akiek, based on the informants I talked to, they say, they are some of them, the elderly, can speak their language, Akiek, when they are together just by themselves when they meet, but most of the time they speak Maasai. So, they are actually regarded as Maasai because they no longer transfer this language to their kids. So you find them there. Now let's have a look at the domains of use of Kisongo. Now, when we say we need to document language, that means there are some signals or factors that may lead to language endangerment, and these are obvious, of course, based on the language policy of Tanzania. Many local languages are spoken at home. So Maasai, Kisongo, Maasai is spoken at home. And, in schools, we use Swahili. That's the language of instruction, medium of instruction, if you like. In marketplaces or shops or in townships, where they sell and buy, because most of the businesses are established by people from other communities, the only language, lingua franca, for them to communicate, that is Maasai and other communities, is Kiswahili. Only in few shops where you find the owners of the shops are Maasai themselves. So a child or a Maasai speaker can speak when they know that the owner of the shop is a Maasai. But in most cases, in townships, in business areas, you'll find Swahili as a language of communication. In churches, I happened to visit a church. I attended church. It was during Christmas, of course. And because, in churches you find people from different communities. That's true. And even priests, people from different ethnic communities. The language used in church is Swahili, at least for the churches I visited there. And mass media, this is obvious that if they want to get news, newspaper, radio, TV, all those media use Swahili as a language of news dissemination. For the case of government or administrative organs, they use Kiswahili, and for some cases they use English. For example, in some of special tasks or events or forms, or when you have donors, NGOs, with some documents, you can find some English. So we are saying that we need to document this variety, especially in Eastern Manyara, because of this looming danger of language endangerment. And we know that there are factors that lead to language endangerment. And these are a few of them, that one being limited use of the local language, that is Maasai, there's a very limited use of the language. And we have seen that it's only used in homes. Another danger is immigrants moving in Eastern Manyara, that is, other people moving in because of the spacious land. They want to have more land for their cattle. Farmers come from different regions all over Tanzania, especially the neighboring regions like Arusha and Kilimanjaro. They move in Kisongo because there's fertile land for farming, and of course, for those who do mixed farming, they do cattle rearing and crop cultivation. Okay, another one is the influence of Kiswahili as a national language. So you could see that, in schools, in churches, in marketplaces, the language used is Swahili. So you find that the Maasai speakers will start borrowing words from other languages. The influence of Swahili is also greater in the sense that it kind of influences a negative attitude towards Maasai. So you find for a Maasai to feel that they are part of the modern world, can communicate with other people speaking other languages, they give away speaking Maasai and they will speak Swahili, and even when they speak to their fellow Kisongo speakers. So that happens sometimes, simply to show that kind of togetherness, conviviality, that I'm also into this new world where I can communicate with everybody. So they go for Swahili. Another one is lack of recognition of local languages in Tanzania, but also the lack of promotion of local languages. Not recognized and not promoted in all sense of wording. And not taught in schools as a subject either. And there is very little research and documentation work done on Maasai or Maasai in general, and Kisongo in particular. Lack of literacy material for kids to read, like storybooks, or any other kind of material in Kisongo, but also the influence of neighboring Bantu languages. And you have seen several languages around the Maasai area, like Meru, Pare, Iraku, Gogo, and then Gu. Okay, so I could also quickly, based on the recordings and preliminary data that I gathered, and because I'm an Arusa speaker myself, one of the dialects of Maasai, I could easily compare listening to the Kisongo and, making reference to my Arusa competence. I could tell that this is a Kisongo speaker, this is a Parakuyo speaker, and this is Arusa speaker. So it is much easier to compare, for example, my dialect and Kisongo to say, okay, mad varieties have this and that kind of variations. So to start with, I noted a few phonological and phonetic differences, and this refers to tone, vowels, and consonants. Just a few examples that we shall see in a moment. But there are also lexical differences, lexical in terms of lexical items, but also semantics. Let's say you can have difference in the sense of a word, can share sense one, but the other dialect has the sense 2 or 3, which is not known or commonly used in another dialect. But also, this suggests that there could also be morphological differences between these dialects. So to start with, we have consonant differences in words like Indaraki that is in Kisongo. In Arusha, we say Nkaraki. So there is, in Kisongo we have T, in Arusha we have K. This word means because. So the other difference in consonants is that the Kisongo say a cordon to hit by head or knock something, whereas for us Arusha we say a cordon. So there is a palato and there is a vela, and yeah, we really want to investigate what influences this, what causes this kind of variation. The second and the third example is Ilosho. For Kisongo, we say Ilaho. So, of course, we know this is common in Maasai, the free variation of the palato, fricative, and the glottal. I mean, yeah. So, excuse me. So, this is, we have sounds that are in complementary distribution, free variation, but some of them are contrastive. But now we can see that we have the same word with the difference in one consonant sound. So we're going to see what is happening here. Another example is where we have toy and doi. We regard Kisongo as a central Ma dialect, whereas Arusa diverted from the standard dialect. Now, I should also mention that Kisongo is much similar with the Maasai, we can call it Maasai proper, spoken in Kenya, especially southern part of Kenya, according to other researchers like Doris Payne and others. So if we could say that there is a kind of phonological process happening from the standard dialect to the other dialects that emerged later, we could say could be voicing, okay, that is from T to D, but yeah, it's subject to further research. Another example is we have Olerampai, and Olerampai, and this is P to B, voicing as well. Yeah, so we have also P and V. This can be a free variation. It doesn't really, it's common in many words. In the next slide, we have, a number of words that show vowel sound variations. We have two vowels in sequence, but also we have single vowel variation. Here we have Olaile, Kisongo, but I also say Olaile, so O to R. And we have Losho and Laho, Alajangani and Olojongani. So Arusha we say Olojongani, so A to O, and other examples showing the same kind of difference. But we have Osorok and Osero. Kisongo say Osorok, O, so we have O, Arusha we have A. And here we also have Olkivei and Olkivioi. And this is lang, so we have A to Oi. We need to find out what is happening here. Further examples, we have, could call it lengthening, but also there are some changes because we have E in Vavai, whereas for us we say Vava or Papa, Papai or Papa, but Maasai and Arusa prefer a Belabe fricative, Va. But here also in Nebonu, so this Kisongo, they came or they come, but here we have Nebun, so we have O to Uo. And we also have R to I in Ankativity Ngativi and Ngaitivi. So yeah, could be raising or something happening here. We have difference in ATR, vowel harmony, advanced tongue root and non-advanced tongue root. In Arusa, we have advanced, we have non-advanced, sorry, and in Kisongo, we have advanced. So yeah, we also have this kind of variations. Tone, I'm yet to explore tone, but is evidence. It's evident that there are variations in tone. So that is subject to another talk next time. And I mentioned of semantic difference or lexical difference. I'm also yet to establish a good number of examples here, but simply to give you a gist of what I mean. Here we have this verb, I lib, to be slender, to soak with water, that's in Kisongo. But in Arusa, we have the same verb, but it means to sprout, or to cry silently. So I don't know how, depends on context to determine which sense is actually referred to or is meant. So it depends context for the Kisongo to understand the Arusa speaker and vice versa. We have quite different lexical items to mean the same thing altogether. So we have in Kisongo, we have loronko, to mean beeswax. In Arusa, we say chasho, to mean the same. We have nkukuri, that is calabash in Kisongo, but in Arusa we have nkoti. So these are, different lexical items that are used to refer to the same entity. So I'm still working on the data, the records I have, and see how further we can establish the variations and differences in these dialects. And that is to be done in the future project. That's the end of my talk. Thank you, and you're welcome for comment and questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation. I think we can now start the question and answer section. If anyone would like to offer a comment or ask a question, please do so by using the Zoom chat module. I will start with my own and give everyone else some time to write. So Michael, you spoke a bit about people with other languages moving into areas where, for example, Kisongo is spoken. I was wondering about Kisongo people who move away from the area, so for example to some of the cities. Would you expect them to still use Kisongo at home and in those kind of domains, or not at all?
All right, thanks, Anne, for your question. For the Kisongo people who move to cities, maybe to work, in most cases to work, they move temporarily. I mean, they go for a month, 2 months, or 6 months, but they get back home later, and they don't go to the cities with their families. It's always that the man, it is the man who goes to look for a job and later come back. And when they go back to their native land, they will always use Kisongo, at least when speaking to the people of his family. That's for sure is the case.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from, either Richard or Andrew. It says, thank you for the presentation, Michael. He's curious to know if there's any Kisongo speakers in Tanga, Dodoma, or Morogoro, so the neighboring areas.
Thanks, Richard and Harvey. Any Kisongo in Tanga I really don't have details about it, but it's unlikely to find them settled in these regions because um, um, when the Maasai settle in an area, they always look at the availability of pasture for their cattle and water, probably. And we still see that the Maasai steppe in Manyara is really spacious. And um, other areas that you mentioned, Tanga, Dodoma, and Morogoro, we can find Maasai, of course, but many of them are Parakuyo. And Parakuyo, in most cases, very mobile, even compared to Kisongo. So it's unlikely, but I'm not saying this. I mean, we can't find any of them there, but it's unlikely to find Kisongo in these areas. But you can find Parakuyo and even some Arusa, a very few number of Arusa speakers.
All right, thank you. I think I will follow that up by a question by Andrew. He asks, you mentioned that lower Kisongo numbers might be due to an influence from Swahili and other Bantu languages. He's interested to know about the influence of other Maasai varieties, so Arusa or Parakuyo, on Kisongo.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. For other dialects, Arusa and Parakuyo to influence Kisongo, I wouldn't say that will or is happening because, as I said earlier, that Kisongo is we regard it as a central Ma dialect or a standard dialect of Maasai in general, or Eastern Nilotic, if you like. So we look at it as the higher standard of our language as people. So it's more likely that we sometimes even imitate to talk like them because we think that is the standard language that identifies us as Maasai. But for them to talk like us, if it happens, then it's very rare. And maybe we can have that as a question to ask when we get back to the field, but it's really interesting. But that's my comment for now, the way we look at it.
Thank you. I have another follow-up question by Andrew, who asks more generally, what is the social situation between these speakers of different Maasai varieties? Is there intermarriage?
Yeah, the intermarriage is happening. It has been happening ever since. So there's really nothing that bars that to happen. People from Arusa can marry from Kisongo, and the only dialect or section that is a bit protective is Parakuyo. Because they're kind of a bit aggressive, if that is a word used there. So they regard themselves as not really open to intermarriage, not that much. If it is happening, maybe because children have gone to schools, they have interacted with a lot of people, so they think they are very somehow liberal. But Kisongo and Arusa, that is quite acceptable and is happening. Only with lesser numbers when you compare Parakuyo practicing intermarriage with other Maasai dialects.
Thank you. Also, Andrew would like to know if there are clans or stories or rituals that are shared between speakers of sub-varieties.
Oh yeah, there are rituals, there are stories, so that can be shared among people or speakers from these sub-varieties. But also we know that there are stories, there are stories or histories or encounters of life experiences that at some point, they are somehow they feel that they are not, free to share, because it should be noted that these sections have been at some point in the past have fought each other just for land and cattle. There have been cattle raiding among the Maasai section. So they have some stories of warriors raiding cattle, and they wouldn't want to share those because it kind of sparks some attitudes that are not pleasant, among themselves. So yeah.
All right. Richard would like to know if there's any evidence of intermarriage with other tribes. So, for example, Raku, Rangi, or Ngu.
Not in this area. Not doesn't happen among the Maasai living there because of their culture and their ways of lives. A Maasai warrior, if he goes for a lady from Ngu or Raku, the kind of regarded as somebody diverted from their culture and tradition, and they would ask themselves some questions, only with some exceptions for those who have been to towns, who have been to universities or have had some education. They can do that. And in most cases, they don't go back to live in Simanjiro or Kiteto. Rather, they live in townships or where they work, because that means they have some profession. So having as those who have not been to school, marrying people from other communities is very likely. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Richard has a follow-up question. So he asked, is the contact or influence from these other tribes then mostly via local varieties of Swahili rather than the languages themselves?
Oh yeah, because a widely spoken language, when they meet in like markets or other places where they meet, is Swahili. So a Maasai would only or use words of these other ethnic groups if he or she has some interest in it or knowing how to speak language. They would try to ask, how do you say this? How do you say that? Mostly they use Swahili, and maybe if there are any borrowed words from these other ethnic groups, let's say Rakugu or Gogo, they could be coming through Swahili. That's quite, plausible to say.
Okay, I have another question by Andrew. He asked, based on what you've learned on this field survey, what do you want to do first when you return to this area? What questions do you want to ask? And what details of the language do you want to further unpack?
Right. First of all, among other things, I would want to record more stories about the history of this dialect of Maasai, from the elderly, and more stories about how they settled there, and how they welcomed other communities, and in like Arusa or other other people like Iraku, Ngu, and their relationship, and what do they see in the future about their occupation or ownership of the land. But also there will be further research or recordings on the elicitation, on particular aspects, linguistic aspect, especially on the differences between these dialects, because it's interesting to find that there are so many words that have some little differences, like vowels and consonants, but also to try to gather more lexical items that are different, differently used, or have a different sense, or they are not, but not preferred by Kisongo. And I mean words that are common in Arusa, but not preferred by Kisongo, and vice versa. So I really hope, I really, wish that I get time to go back there and make a proper elicitation based on the quick observation that we have seen in this presentation.
Thank you. Those are all the comments and questions of today. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that recordings of all of the presentation in the Rift Valley webinar series can be found on the Rift Valley Network YouTube page, and entries for each presentation are added to the Rift Valley bibliography. Looking ahead, the next presentation in the webinar series will be given on Wednesday, March 11 by Andrew Harvey and Daisuke Shinagawa, and it is titled Tone in Ihansu. I would like to thank Michael again for his presentation, and of course everyone else for participating today. And I hope to see you again at our next webinar.